Today on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we are going to be talking about some of the media availabilities of Nick Cousins and Marc Staal. And we're also going to be doing our first What If segment of the offseason, talking about what's going on in the Florida Panthers past, present, and future of what if scenarios. And we are going to discuss the latest Team USA World Junior Camp invites, and unfortunately, we're going to have a very uncomfortable conversation about the latest that's going on for Team Canada, all on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, July 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at MonoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also follow Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL will be covering all the off-season activities around the National Hockey League. So, guys, it's a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Like we said at the top, we are going to first discuss really the latest Florida Panthers who have had some media availabilities. And we've talked about really how the Florida Panthers' approach has really been with the situation that they've been in with the cap, really bringing in some veterans to the franchise on the cheap, on the NHL level and even on the AHL level, to mentor some of the young guys down in Charlotte. But let me bring in my guest here on the show, Jacob Winans here. And Jacob, great to have you back as always on a Winans Wednesday edition of Locked On Panthers.
Thank you for having me. I'm kind of in the heat of the off season now, just the long wait till regular season. So I'll be here every week.
Absolutely. And I don't necessarily know on the top of my head the days counting until opening night. You know what? Maybe I should set a calendar on like an app to see like when October 19th for at least home opener will be. So don't know that on the top of my head. But let's talk about really the latest media availabilities for the Panthers on their new signings. On Monday, we had Nick Cousins speak to the media, really just coming off 2 seasons with the Nashville Predators a few years ago, making a conference final with the Vegas Golden Knights. And, of course, Marc Staal, 35-year-old defenseman, veteran defenseman who's played 14 years in the National Hockey League, 12 of them with the New York Rangers, the last 2 with Detroit. And really, the more I think about it, with, like I said, the cap crunches that the Florida Panthers have, it's not the biggest signings for this team. But when you talk about players who have made it far, at least in the postseason, it gives me more optimism, and especially the way they talk about the group that the Panthers have, that these could be good value signings.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We're talking about guys who have playoff experience, and Marc Staal especially. He's played in the Stanley Cup final. He's gone as with New York anyway, as far as he can go, short of winning the cup. He has the experience. He was at one time one of the top defensive defensemen in the game. So honestly, the skill, the ability, the speed may not still be what it used to be, but the head on his shoulders is still he's still one of the smartest hockey minds in the game. So I think he's going to have a place here on the roster, and he showed in Detroit. He still has something left in the tank. His numbers weren't atrocious on a really bad Detroit team. He spent some time with Mo Sider, and I think if you ask Mo Sider if Marc Staal was a good influence on his game, he would absolutely tell you yes. So it's exciting to have him. Nick Cousins is another interesting signing for me. A lot of us Panther fans have not liked him very much past couple seasons, especially during the COVID year. having to play the Predators so often. It seemed like he and Huberdeau had a personal issue going every time they matched up. They had a couple of fights. They were antagonizing each other, some pretty nasty cross checks. And during Nick Cousins' media availability, he says Huberdeau called him to welcome him to the team. So, that's hockey. It kind of reminds me of the Uyghur and Achari story. They played that prank on Uyghur when Achari was signed, flashing back to their fight. So that's how hockey goes, and it's going to be exciting to see how these guys fit in.
Sometimes you kiss, you make up, and you move on. And I remember there was a specific moment towards the beginning of that COVID season where Huberdeau just had a very devious laugh as the faceoff was being conducted, and then they were just dropping the gloves in the very beginning of that COVID season. And I remember one of the games, it was like it cost the Panthers a game with a lost challenge and then losing it in overtime. It feels like that was such a long time ago. Crazy to think. But going back to Marc Staal, I mean, he didn't lead. He wasn't near the top of time on ice in all situations for the Detroit Red Wings last season. However, in shorthanded time on ice, he led all defensemen on the Detroit Red Wings in that category of being on the ice during a very crucial part of the game when you're shorthanded. And I know, once again, plus minus isn't the end all be all, but for a team like the Detroit Red Wings, who had one of the worst goal differentials in the National Hockey League last season, Marc Staal was specifically only a -1 throughout the season. So that has to account for something.
Yeah, Marc Staal is kind of the epitome of the old saying with defensemen: if you don't notice them, they're doing their job. A good defenseman is not supposed to be noticed. Marc Staal is that in a player. He doesn't do anything flashy. He doesn't do anything fancy, but he blocks shots. He throws his body. He's never in the wrong position. Penalty killing was a huge problem for the Panthers in the playoffs. It was a problem for the Panthers in the last playoffs. Penalty killing just has not been up to par for the Panthers, and Marc Staal is a guy who can really help turn that in the right direction. He blocks shots. His stick is always in the proper spot. He doesn't get pulled out of his gaps. I really like what he can bring to the penalty kill, and he just plays stable minutes. He can't give you 20 to 25 minutes a night anymore, but he can definitely give you a solid 15 to 18 where he does his job and you don't have to worry about him. So I really do like what he brings to the table. Nick Cousins is another guy who has a similar impact. He's gritty. He's going to play in all situations, but penalty kill is not a problem for him. But Marc Staal is definitely that guy. He's hockey tough. He blocked shots and even blocked one with his eye one time. Totally unintentional, but he's made a great career out of doing this exact thing. So it's exciting to see him join the team.
Yeah, and looking at some of the block shots for Marc Staal, 2014, 2015, the year after the Rangers made it to the Stanley Cup final, 123 block shots in 80 games. The very next season, 2015, 2016, 120 in 77 games. And, in 71 games, he had 75. I mean, you're having a block per game. So you're putting yourself in position consistently. So that's, even though, like you said, he won't be playing the big minutes and he probably won't be even on the top penalty kill unit next season. But hey, if a situation comes where one of your top penalty killers happens to be in the box, you can insert him in it. It's not, I don't think it doesn't kill your team that much.
Right. So like we're talking about with Marc Staal, you want stability. You want a guy who's going to play those bottom pair minutes and not make mistakes, and that's exactly what you're going to get with Marc Staal. You said he had 75 block shots in 71 games. That's over a block per game, again, in limited ice time. He's playing third pair minutes. So he's going to come in and he's going to bring that element to the team. And that's the on the ice stuff, but off the ice, this is a guy who's seen everything you can see in the NHL. The experience is there. He's been on winning teams. He's been on losing teams. He knows everything there is to know about the NHL. So it's an exciting addition that not a whole lot of people really saw coming. I don't think anyone really paid much attention to it, but it's an exciting addition. And I will remind everybody, Colorado last offseason, they had a very similar approach last offseason to signing veterans, depth players. And if you look at the guys who contributed to their cup run, They got huge, meaningful performances out of guys like Andrew Cogliano and Darren Helm and all these guys who no one's going to pay attention to them as flashy signings, but they're going to do their job and they're going to contribute to the bigger goal of winning. So that's what Marc Staal is all about.
Mm. And the crazy thing about it is Marc Staal got that call from Bill Zito when he was golfing in Pebble Beach in California, one of the most iconic venues in all of golf. Like, that was one of the venues that Tiger Woods won in 2000 on his way to the Tiger Slam, where he won 4 majors in a row. And it's funny because this past weekend was the Open at St. Andrews, and that was another venue that Tiger won at in the year in 2001. So crazy how that all just connects from this weekend, signing Marc Staal, and of course the Open being at St. Andrews. Nick Cousins also mentioned about how Jonathan Huberdeau called him to welcome him, like you mentioned, and of course what Nick Cousins also praised the Panthers was how they were built up the middle, because I think center and left wing, at least in the top of the lineup, it's pretty much set. Really, the question is really the right side of the forward lines, and also he also has connections with Anthony Duclair, playing with him in Arizona in a brief time with Radko Gudas. So, you know, people talk around the league outside of the game. You know, you still create connections from different times playing with players, and you know, it seems to be, he spoke about yesterday how it seems to have a good vibe in the locker room, and of course, winning helps a lot with that. So catching up with an old teammate, hey, it really pays dividends for both Nick Cousins getting his stability and the Panthers bringing in a veteran.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's always helpful going to a new team when there's a friendly face in there that you're familiar with. But where Nick Cousins is concerned, I think he slots in nicely on that third line, potentially on the fourth line if someone really breaks out in camp. But Nick Cousins plays that bottom six left wing and center roles. He can fill either one, and he does it well. Again, a guy who's not afraid to throw his body. He's not afraid to get in the corners and win board battles. But he's also a sneaky good playmaker. He's got some passing ability to his game. He can finish in the crease. I really like what he brings to the table. I think if he is on a line with Anton Lundell and potentially Sam Reinhart, you try to replace Marchment as best you can. Nick Cousins is a guy who's going to get the first crack at doing that. And I really do like his fit. I think the signing itself, the contract, it's very team friendly. And I'm really looking forward to what he can bring to the bottom six, because he brings an element of playoff style hockey to that bottom six. And you're getting him at the right time in his career. He's in the right phase of his career. He's in his prime. And I think he's going to make a major contribution. He's one guy I could really see having the best season of his NHL career.
Absolutely. And 17 playoff games in that one season with Vegas definitely can bring definitely something to the table for the Panthers. So we're going to discuss next on this episode of Locked On Panthers our first what if segment of the offseason. It's going to be a fun, exciting one. We're going to start off with a definite bang, but first we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the number one source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball. If you were watching the All-Star game yesterday, as a Marlins fan, you saw Sandy Alcantara pitch a 1-2-3 inning, and we saw former Marlin and current Yankee Giancarlo Stanton hit a 2-run bomb last night. Don't tell anyone, but you know Jacob's a Yankee fan. But hey, at least he's not a Met fan. That's a better thing in these parts of South Florida. But you can get it all on BetOnline with Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live, in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment here on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I got Jacob Winans here on this show. And Jacob, we spoke about our first what if we were going to talk about prior to the show. Didn't give away any spoilers on what I was thinking along the lines. But a conversation came up yesterday on our Locked On hosts group chat. And one of the questions was, why hasn't Phil Kessel still signed with the team? And the first thing I thought of was saying how people don't want to deal with a streak ending, and they don't want to be that team to be responsible for it. So I want to relate this back to the Panthers, where the Panthers were kind of trapped in that situation just 2 seasons ago about Keith Yandle and his Ironman streak, which eventually ended when he went to Philadelphia. So I want to, with our first what if scenario for the Panthers, what if the Panthers decide, the coaching staff, mind you, and management decided to just say, we don't care about your streak, Keith Yandle. We are going to scratch you because we feel that we need opportunities for other players. What if the Panthers decided to scratch Keith Yandle opening night of 2021?
Wow. So that if people recall, was a really, really huge story. Kind of caused a bit of an uprising across the league. Even some threats of legal action, which I'm not sure how that would even make sense, but it was a big deal with the NHLPA and players around the league that kind of trashed the Panthers brass for wanting to scratch Yandle. And I kind of wish they had, because that whole season it just dragged on and on and on, the Yandle saga, and I think it took a negative toll on the team, their play on the ice, because the entire time they went through this season, it was one weak link on that defense. Anton Strawman was getting older and was by no means a good player at that time, but Keith Yandle was undoubtedly the worst player on the Panthers for his whole last season here. I feel like if he had been scratched, it opens doors to other players, and the Panthers can cut ties and move on a little bit earlier than they did. But the one thing that I would say is, if the Panthers had scratched him, I don't think his trade value would have tanked as quickly as it did. I think him being exposed that entire season completely tanked his trade value to the point where the Panthers could not move him and had to buy him out. And if they had simply scratched him, there was such an uproar from players around the league saying this guy shouldn't be scratched. Preserve his streak. He still has something left in the tank. I think the Panthers realistically could have traded him out of Florida had they scratched him. I think he would have waived his no movement clause because he had already been scratched. The relationship would have been broken. And I think someone out there, Philly comes to the top of my head as a team that he may have been traded to, or Boston at the time was looking for an offensive puck moving defenseman. So really, I think if the Panthers had scratched him that game, if they had held firm, they may have ruffled some feathers in the locker room and upset some people. But I think they probably would have been able to trade him, and we would not be in this cap situation right now where we're paying his massive buyout charge this upcoming season.
That's exactly where I was going, because I believe that even if there was a rift in the locker room for a little bit, once you play some games, it's not necessarily that I don't think they'll forget about it, but I think they'll be more focused. I would like to think that they would be more focused on the games ahead of them and trying to win, instead of letting something like this divide the locker room. I would think, especially with who they had at coach at the time, who so I would like to think that they would not let it tear them apart, is what I'm saying. I don't know what the lasting effects would have been as far as relationships go, but you're absolutely right on trade value. And you mentioned Boston in that one. That's his hometown too. So that could have been possibly a better fit for him emotionally, and having an opportunity to go back to his family up there. He's currently a free agent right now. He hasn't necessarily retired. But after the season he had in Philly, I'm not sure whether or not he'll be signed. Phil Kessel hasn't been signed neither. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check whether to see Patrick Marleau is officially retired or not. But
He is.
Okay, so he is. But even before he officially announced his retirement, he was having a hard time finding a team as well because of that streak, and that puts a lot of pressure on teams to do so. So even if you get a little bit of an asset back and just for a salary dump and just say, hey, take some of this salary for now, give us a freaking 7. I don't care at that point. And, even as a third pairing defenseman, we saw how he was burned on that third pair all year when we realized at the time the only reason he's there is that streak. And it's just like, felt like an anchor that was dragging this team down all throughout that 2021 season. And now we're starting to see the lingering effects of the whole Dale Talon and Tom Rowe era. I mean, you put a no movement clause in his contract for 7 years after coming from the Rangers. And it's just the no movement clause part hurts. And also it doesn't help that there was an expansion draft. So you had to do everything you could have at that time to protect Forsling. That was the main one that the Panthers, that was priority as far as their defensemen, prioritizing Forsling. So it could have come at a situation where you didn't have to make, I don't know if the proper word is panic move, but you had to make a move that was just like, we can no longer have this guy on our team, and let someone else, maybe a non-playoff team, be part of that. And look what happened. Philly officially scratched them. You didn't hear the uproar that was there like there was in Florida. At least I don't remember. But it's crazy what happens when it happens just a year apart.
Yeah, definitely. So if you want to dive really into it, one, if they had been able to trade him, I really do think they could have salary dumped him, similar to what they did with Anton Strawman. You pay someone a second or a third to take on his salary. You get a conditional pick back, essentially nothing, but it clears up that salary. But I think the 3 teams that really had a shot at getting him or were really interested in getting him via trade, it's Philly, it's Boston, it's New York. New York, I don't think would have pulled the trigger. They were kind of in a soft rebuild to kind of get to where they are now, investing in their youth. But Philly, I really feel like Philly would have taken him at full salary if they had. Now they're the team that's strapped with the buyout. And you wonder how that would have played into Claude Giroux this past season. You wonder how that would have played into their offseason this year, where they say Philly is the team now that has a $5.9 million cap hit next season. I wonder how that affects what they would have done this offseason. And if Boston is the team that takes him in a trade, they definitely don't have the salary at the trade deadline to go get a guy like Hampus Lindholm. So it very easily could have been Philly or Boston dealing with these cap issues that we're dealing with this season coming up. And, it sucks that it turned out the way it did. But when he was scratched in Philly, it seemed that people understood why. There were some guys who wanted him in the lineup because Philly was already out of the playoffs, but he had the worst plus minus in the entire league. Like without a doubt, by every metric, every advanced stat, every surface stat, he was the worst defenseman in the NHL this season. I think he's going to be hard pressed to find another team. But the Panthers really, if they had scratched him, I really feel that they would have been able to get out from under the weight of the Keith Yandle effect, much cleaner than they ended up having to. But you made a very good point about Tom Rowe and Dale Talon. So Keith Yandle was the last of the Tom Rowe signings to go, and now we only have one signing from Dale Talon's last offseason with the Panthers still remaining, and that's Sergei Bobrovsky. But with Noel Acciari signing in St. Louis, that last offseason Dale Talon had, where he went big, handed out a bunch of money and tried to make us a contender. Brett Connolly was shipped off. Strawman is sent away, and Noel Acciari has now signed elsewhere. So it's just Bob remaining now. It's really that was a swing and a miss of an offseason for Dale Talon, looking back on it. And Tom Rowe, the same can be said when it comes to Keith Yandle's contract.
Absolutely, and we're as we approach year 3 of the Zito era. Now we're starting to see like really how his moves are affecting the team. Of course, it brought him to his President's Trophy last year, but of course, it required shipping off some assets in order to fix what happened previously as well. And thankfully they were doing all this without tanking. So that's a good thing about getting all the way to the President's Trophy. But hey, we're all about trying to eventually get the Stanley Cup, and hey, the team is still good enough to do so. In the third and final segment, we are going to discuss some of the USA World Junior Camp invites from the Florida Panthers, as well as talking about the latest situation with Hockey Canada going on, all on this Winans Wednesday edition of Locked On Panthers.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Got Jacob Winans here. And Jacob, a few camp invites from the Panthers with the World Juniors being postponed from what happened last December, of course, with the Omicron variant spreading and really everybody going down. This time around, the World Juniors is from last year has been rescheduled for starting August 9th. And 3 Panthers prospects who have been part of the USA national development team are part of the team. We have one from each. It's really spread out as far as like where they're drafted. Of course, Mackie Samoskevich, really before it got postponed last season, Samoskevich had a goal for Team USA in their one and only game. 6th-round goalie from this past draft, Tyler Muzelik, is also part of the camp invite. Not necessarily part of the team. We don't know those results yet. And of course, Jack Devine, Mike Benning's teammate for their national championship at the University of Denver, a 7th-round pick, 221st overall. But the latest. And I haven't really spoken about this on the show yet because I wanted more information to come out before officially talking about it. But like we spoke about off camera before recording, and trigger warning for anyone listening to this, because this is a topic about sexual assault, and so for anyone who doesn't know what's going on, the 2018 Hockey Canada World Junior Team, 8 players have been accused of sexual assault during their time with the World Junior Team. And a lot of them are very recognizable names in the NHL who are currently playing today. And more findings of this lawsuit that's going on and this investigation goes to show about cell phone recording videos of the assault. Players coming out like Robert Thomas of the St. Louis Blues and Connor Timmins of the Arizona Coyotes coming out. And here's the worst one, Jacob, that I heard today, is that Hockey Canada puts multi-million dollars of money away for cases of sexual assault. And hearing this I was in shock. But at the same time, I was like disappointed, but not surprised at the same time, because of course that's an organization that needs to protect themselves. But at the same time, why are we at this point where you have to put money away in case these situations come?
Yeah. So the way you open that, I think is a great illustration of what this is supposed to be about. World Junior Championships are a huge deal. It's supposed to be a celebratory occasion. It's a dream on so many players' checklist on their way to hopefully making it to the NHL and winning a Stanley Cup. Every player who ever plays hockey wants to represent their country. and like you said, we have 3 Panthers representing Team USA in camp right now. Congratulations to them. But what happened with this Hockey Canada team in 2018, it's everything that hockey's not supposed to be. We don't know who the players are. We know some of the players who have denied any involvement, but we don't know who in particular was involved in what happened. But it's everything that needs to not be a part of hockey. It's ridiculous that we're even at this point. And Hockey Canada, quite honestly, should be ashamed of themselves for how they've handled this beginning to end. At first, they kind of covered it up from the very beginning. No one wanted this story getting out. You throw the stereotypical move is to throw settlement money at someone when this type of thing happens, just to keep it quiet. And it's not something that can be kept quiet. It's not something that should be kept quiet. Victims of these situations, you don't just shoo them away and give them a check. The fact that Hockey Canada had a reserve fund available for these situations, it just shows where their minds were at, as far as, if these problems come up, we need to have money to get rid of the problem instead of addressing it in-house and being harsher with your penalties and making a zero tolerance policy. You can't claim zero tolerance on anything if you have a reserve fund to get rid of the problems that come up for you. If you're truly zero tolerance, then the fund should not be about paying the victims to be quiet. It should be going towards sexual assault training, or immediately banning players and offering support to the victim in ways other than just a settlement check. Paying someone a settlement does not change what they've gone through, and these players go on to enjoy NHL success. They win medals, they win trophies, they get paid $1 million contracts, and they face no consequence because a settlement has been paid, and they just get to move on, and they never learn a lesson. And that's how you have a generational issue in hockey and anywhere in life, if this is a practice that you allow to happen. So I think Hockey Canada should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. And I really do have faith that this investigation is going to turn up with facts, and the people who did these horrible acts they're gonna have to face the consequence. And I hope the NHL takes it very, very seriously in how they decide to hand out punishments should this be brought to light entirely.
And you spoke about how, yeah, you pay millions of dollars in settlements, but people don't consider what the victim is going through emotionally, and all the counseling that they'll have to go through in order to try to, to get over that emotional hump that they've been through. Because that it's easy for people who haven't gone through anything like that to just say move on from it. No, it's not that simple for anyone to go through something like that. We just of course, the Kyle Beach story hadn't come out at the time of that situation happening for the 2018 Hockey Canada World Junior team, but still, that first being brought to light should raise so many alarms, and just saying, you do this is going to happen. This has to be zero tolerance. This has to be zero tolerance on any level. It doesn't matter. And it's so bad. I saw something today that was like even more shocking. It's so bad when even the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, is coming out and talking about this situation as well with Hockey Canada. And for the Canadian listeners, this isn't just to say whether I agree with Justin Trudeau's policies or not. I don't really know much of his policies, and so I don't have really an opinion. But Justin Trudeau, the leader of their country, even talking about and calling them out as well. That's how you know that this is a huge deal.
Yeah, it's an issue that's been in hockey culture for so long, and it's something that we're really trying hard as a hockey community. Everyone needs to be trying to get this out of our sport. And you've seen it with things like concussions. You've seen it with things like race issues. And it's coming to light now with sexual assaults and things like that. the idea that you can brush these problems aside in the chase of hockey glory and winning takes priority over these real life issues, it has to be gone. When something like this happens, it needs to be career ending. If you did something like this, your career needs to be over. It has to be zero tolerance. There's no wiggle room there as far as I'm concerned. These are guys who are between the ages of 18 and 20 years old. They know better. They are adults at that point. There is no tolerance for this. And if you're not a hockey player and you're just a random citizen on the street and you do an act like this, there is no $1 million settlement fund to cover your mistake. You don't get that privilege just because you're a hockey player. And I would say this: I can't imagine how difficult it must be for a victim, whether they got paid or not, to turn on your TV to watch Hockey Night in Canada, and you see a player being celebrated and glorified on TV, knowing what that player may have done to you. I can't imagine what that could be like as a victim, and to be the only one who knows that, and the world doesn't know what they've really done and who they really are outside of their hockey success. That's just really hard to think about, and it's not fair to put a victim in that position. So honestly, Hockey Canada, they should be ashamed of themselves for how they've handled this. Some things just are not as. Some things are more important, I should say, than just winning a medal and winning a tournament. You can't brush these problems aside.
And that is why that when this fan base was a good portion of it was one speaking out about wanting Coach Q back, that for me personally, it just didn't feel right to entertain bringing him back. Because first of all, a reinstatement from the league has to happen first. But other than that, I also personally thought there was nothing to talk about on that front. But also for the Panthers to move on in a different direction. It's like, no, this is not the baggage that we want as far as bringing him back. And personally, for me, I felt like it was the right decision for me to like not talk about that and entertain it when it shouldn't have been. And hopefully we find out more about what is to come out of this investigation. And unfortunately, when we know more about it, it's something that's going to be talked about here on Locked On Panthers. But Jacob, I want to thank you for joining on this Winans Wednesday edition of Locked On Panthers. We had a very fun show talking about the press conferences. And of course, we had to have a very difficult conversation about what's going on in the game. But for everybody, to tell everybody who's listening, tell them where they can find you online.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8, and you can find my work at pantherparkway.com. And Armando, I do want to thank you for bringing up that topic, as difficult as it is for everyone to talk about and to hear. It is important to shed light on it. So using this platform here to do so is big respect to you.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Yes, sir. I will be here.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to listen to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Still Roden, where they'll be covering all the offseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.